Welcome back to the middle ground. I have been recovering from some intense coursework this summer, and I hope everyone had a fantastic Halloween. Welcome to November. It's definitely moved into fall here. We've had a lot of rain, which we love. But there's obviously been a lot going on in the US Congress in the past month. I haven't made many videos about it because of the give and take, and I was just focused on the moments at hand to bring about those discussions. So now we're moving into this new speaker era, which is ironic to me in a lot of ways. This mild mannered Christian guy from Louisiana, Johnson, I went to school with this guy. Not him, Johnson, we did not go to school together, but I went to high school with everyone like him. So I definitely want to get into my personal background. I want to get into some of the issues surrounding Johnson that tie into some very personal backgrounds for me. And I don't think he's going to last very long. He just started out the day one swinging, going after every popular policy group out there. So he has no experience. He's naive. And honestly, he just doesn't have the preparation for the job. And so I have a pastor in Tennessee who observes this almost becomingly more aggressive, this evangelical group that started the MAGA movement that centers around anti intellectualism. I want to get into that. And he said that they're kind of becoming more aggressive because they realize this is the last grasp for this anti-intellectual religiosity and definitions. And so those are the topics I want to cover in the mess that we see in the House today. But I have advised my friends in the Democratic Party that the way to make progress here is not to go after people with beliefs. Like I said, I come from Atlanta, from this conservative Christian community that can think critically. And so if you just go after their beliefs, that's all they're going to hear. And you're just going to make it about what the narrative is. The liberals are godless atheists. And they're just going to confirm that. And then the Democrats are going to lose the ground that they've gained in Georgia. As I've mentioned, I want to have options in Georgia. I want to have two parties with great candidates to vote for who are actually going to represent the interests in Georgia. I don't want a monopoly. I don't want a train wreck party as he was not giving me any options, and then another party that's completely incompetent. So I'm motivated to see strong options on the ballot where I could choose between two good candidates, not have one bad candidate as the only option. My personal background, I grew up in Atlanta, going to a prep school that is ranked highly in the country. It's called Westminster Schools of Atlanta. When I was there, it was Mike Johnson. So it was very preppy, mild-mannered Christian was the mold they tried to put everyone into. And it's a prep school, so they build their credibility based on where they send people to college. So everyone attends college, and obviously they want to get the highest percentage into Ivy League schools and other high-ranking universities to prove the worth for paying this high tuition. And it was interesting because the college counselor told me I could not get into an Ivy League school because my classmates who looked like Mike Johnson were my competition, and they would have a better chance of getting into an Ivy League school than me. And it was ironic because I was literally holding recruitment letters from every Ivy League school, and I had a stamped admission application to Penn. Cornell, Dartmouth both called me, pressuring me to apply early, even though it was freezing and there was lots of snow there. And I was from Atlanta and I'm a sun baby. I was really like, maybe not the best fit for me. But the contrast and the disconnect between preparing the students from our school who were supposed to just look like Mike Johnson and this kind of anti-intellectual belief system being what was competitive for university admission, and then myself being told that I didn't fit that model, but I was being recruited by every Ivy League school, right? So clearly there's this disconnect from understand this anti-intellectual religious movement in understanding how to prepare for the bigger world, how to really embrace faith-based and intellectualism. And I definitely want to get into this in my experience. But I want to mention that growing up in this environment, everyone warned me of how bad it would be to go to an Ivy League school. When I was admitted to Yale, throughout my college experience, they were like, oh, there must be no Christians there. I literally was praying with one of my best friends who was in my Christian groups with me, but also was in the band with me. So we had known each other since middle school. And he was praying with me that I would meet one Christian at Yale. Like, that's how the disconnect between what they assumed it was like to go to an Ivy League school where you're surrounded by liberal people, that you would find no Christians. And it's interesting because Bill Mayer has mentioned something recently about people who go to Ivy League schools, and it's an indoctrination for liberalism. And then Adam Kinzinger also was like, yes, this is so true. Everyone who goes to Ivy League schools are so liberal. This is what I grew up with in high school. That if I were going to go to an Ivy League school, I wouldn't be able to be a Christian. And I was going to be surrounded by all these liberal people who are going to indoctrinate me. I heard it all because I grew up in this world. And so I want to say, when I got to Yale, I said, gosh, I'm here to pursue intellectual education. And now I have an opportunity to take all of these classes in theology because that's my priority. I took Christian doctrine at the Divinity School. I took history, U.S. American religious history with Butler, who's a famous American historian professor. I took Jewish history and the Second Temple history. And I took Roman history because this is the world where the Bible occurred. I had enough if Yale offered minors, I had enough classes in religious studies that it could have declared that a minor. Yale does not offer minors. My major was biology. So I was studying theology and I was studying science. And I was as a senior, in leadership for Campus Crusade at Yale. And here comes Michael Johnson, who supposedly is this defender of the faith, who took 0 theology classes in college. So I went to supposedly this liberal university where it was impossible to be Christian. I was a leader of a Christian group. I was like, my belief system is such a priority for me that I'm going to put my money where my mouth is, and the classes I'm going to take are going to be to learn about my faith. Did Johnson do that? No. So the amount of hypocrisy is astounding. And as I said, it blew the minds of my high school, where they prepared everyone to look like Mike Johnson, that I got into Yale and none of those students did. And my college counselor was having a hard time with the Yale admissions. They could not understand what Yale was looking for. And it was not liberalism. I was never dinged for what I believed. In fact, that's what my interview was about. As I mentioned, I went to this very evangelical Christian high school that was a prep school, and they wanted to send students to Ivy League schools. And however, because it was this private Christian school, they required every teacher to sign a statement of faith saying they believed in Jesus. So they did not let somebody be a teacher at the school who held different beliefs. And when I was in school, this became a national controversy, which was a little weird to me, why people cared so much that this private Christian school did what they wanted to do. So, not any kind of public institution, zero government funding. However, my understanding of the criticism was that my school wanted to claim they were preparing students for schools like Harvard. And Harvard said, excuse me, if your students are only getting exposure to one point of view, they're not prepared for an education at Harvard. We need to know that your students are getting exposed to different points of view. That was the main criticism. That was the topic of my Yale interview because it was my senior year that this controversy was happening. And actually, my senior year, they finally hired one part-time teacher who was Jewish, who ironically taught me my senior year New Testament Bible class. Yes, just let that sink in. However, I went to my Yale interview. It was an English teacher who had graduated from Yale, who was an alumni, who taught English at a rival prep school, literally down the street from my high school, a couple miles. And we got in this interview. He was very laid back, made it very easygoing. And he said, hey, let's talk about what's going on over there. Let's talk about this hiring policy. What do you think about it? And I was very forthright that this faith was an issue, a priority for me. I was never dinged for that by Yale. And I demonstrated circumspection and I demonstrated critical thinking. I said, this is what this experience has been like for me. There have been highs and lows. Because there are teachers who are motivated, it's inspiring to me and it motivates me and it helps influence my path in wanting to learn more about my beliefs. However, there are moments that make me uncomfortable in some of the practices at the school. And I have a lot of friends at the school who are Jewish, and I can't imagine if it's uncomfortable for me, how is it making them feel? And my college counselor was over the moon that the Yale admissions office fell in love with me because she had no students who she could really get Yale admissions officers excited about because they all looked like Mike Johnson, who just doesn't make understanding his faith a priority, is anti-intellectual, and then claims that he's a defender of the faith. I went to school with people like him. Preston Smith is not a name that means anything to people outside of Georgia, but means something to the Georgia Republican Party, like Hunter Hill, except Preston Smith didn't get as far. Preston Smith is somebody who was a leader in the Christian groups when I was in high school. His sister was a year younger than me and best friends with a good friend of mine. And so I knew Preston Smith. I looked up to him as a 14-year-old. And I remember attending a debate by him in a Christian group where he had a 20-page document that he passed out copies to every single person in the room to explain why evolution couldn't be real. And he went into politics in the Georgia Senate and had a wife, he's a Christian leader with a wife with several children, and then had an affair with his assistant and got divorced and is no longer in politics. And my dad would run into him all the time at Georgia Republican events. And so this story was why he was in and out or not participating in politics anymore, because it cost him his marriage. Being in the Georgia Republican Party, who claims to be so Christian, cost him his marriage. And that's the person doing what Mike Johnson is doing, parading around his faith, parading around that he believes in a young earth theory. And it's a threat to his belief if the earth is not young. So this was part of the argument I grew up with. that if evolution exists, it somehow undermines the sanctity of human life. Because human life is in the image of God, because God created human life. And that's why it's important to have a young earth and a creationist theory that fits a young earth theory. And my question is, I wanted to mention in my religious history class with Professor Butler, we covered this. We covered the late 19th century emergence of evolution and the battle that started happening between Christians we're talking about 150 years ago. And these anti-intellectual Christians are kind of stuck in the belief system from 1870, 1880. That's crazy to me that their Christian teachings and their religious beliefs can't evolve over 150 years. And Mike Johnson said he's got this 18th century belief system. So you don't believe anything new. You can't absorb new information and adapt your beliefs. Your beliefs are so fragile that they're so threatened by any new information that's happened in the last 300 years. And I have a pet peeve about these people my family has been in North America since 1640, 1650. And when people try to recreate that history to fit their narrative and kind of co-opt my family's history, who were actually there, who are actually part of supporting the revolutionary efforts, that they are going to superimpose what they wanted that history to mean, really pisses me off. So I really don't like him doing that, and he's one of those people. And there's no critical thinking about it. It's just knee-jerk. Instead of intellectual pursuit of your faith and understanding. When I was at Yale, some of my mentors and really close friends started an offshoot focused a lot on the graduate school called the Rivendell Institute, because they said, we want to enforce and support this idea of worshiping God and exercising your faith means intellectual pursuit, means excellence intellectually. And that's what the people that I grew up with, like Mike Johnson, don't push. There are people in that community, do not push themselves. Do not push themselves intellectually to say, this faith and belief system is important to actually engage and learn about governance, about what my faith means, so it's not, and so that it's actually solid and isn't so fragile that it could be, we could pull the thread of maybe the earth was older than 6,000 years, and that's not going to make my faith crumble. Because I don't understand a faith that is that fragile, that you are not building up, you're not investing in, that's so fragile. Why is that a faith worth having? Why is that something worth believing in if it is so fragile, if your God is so weak that your beliefs can be crumbled by something so minor? Even suggesting it, that your beliefs are not strong enough to adapt to new information and say, okay, well, if this scientific theory is true, just if, then my beliefs are strong enough to embrace that and to absorb that understanding. Because that's what I did. I studied biology. I studied theology. I was in leadership in campus groups. And I have many friends who studied biology with me. Many were Asian. I have a picture of some of my campus groups where I was the only white person. My mom asked me if I had any other white friends, because all of my friends in the picture in this particular group were Asian. No, there was one other white girl. But many of them had these crises because they were studying for medicine. I have many friends from these groups who've gone on to be doctors and really amazing doctors, experts in their field. And they also had this crisis of, well, will my beliefs be shaken if there are different theories or different scientific theories about the world that don't fit this very narrow minded, very narrow focused? We must have this young earth of this certain age in order for our beliefs to stand. So that's my very thorough criticism of Mike Johnson because I come from the same world and I went to school with people like him, and I was told that somehow I was not prepared for Ivy League schools, and people like him were more prepared. And it was the complete disconnect from reality of what really Yale admissions was looking for me to hold my beliefs and be able to hold other things that could appear to contradict each other, but be able to hold two different sets of facts that could both be true and not crumble under the pressure, to have the circumspection to consider and embrace how could both of these things potentially be true at the same time. And that's the problem with where this conservative movement is being held back and not moving forward, and not because they've just said intellectualism is wrong. And if you're intellectual, then you have to be liberal and you have to abandon your faith. And again, if you can't, maybe your faith isn't strong enough. Maybe you cannot go be challenged intellectually and hold on to who you are. And that's a you issue, right? These issues that some of these Christians have, or fear of any idea that might challenge their beliefs and be the one thread that causes them to crumble, is fear. And I'm sorry, throughout my Yale years, whenever people had birthdays, I would give them birthday cards. All of my friends, my teammates, my classmates, I would write the verse from 2 Timothy that God has given you a sound mind and not a spirit of fear. But that's not the faith that these people are demonstrating. So that's my 2 cents. Peace.